the active participle in biblical Hebrew. In our journey through the Hebrew verb thus far, we have started, unlike many grammars, most grammars I would say, with the imperfect yichtov, yichtov, tichtov, tichtov, which we met, of course, in its usual guise as the vayiktol, the regular storytelling past tense. And that is far and away the most common verb form that you will meet in biblical Hebrew prose. And so that's why we started with it. We then moved on to the perfect katav, katva, katavta, katavt, katavti, and so on and so forth. And these two forms of the verb, the imperfect and the perfect, are the only two forms which change depending on person, number, and gender. Each of them have 10 forms: the he, she, you masculine singular, you feminine singular, I, and then the same for the plural forms. We then moved on to talk about the imperative, the command form, and we noted in particular how similar it is to the imperfect. So tichtov, you will write, ketov, write. Towards the very end of term, we spoke about the infinitive construct, this uh-oh pattern, which, if you remember, is just one form, one word, but can take endings as if it were a regular noun. So kot vi, my writing. Omdacha, your standing. At last, therefore, we move on to the participle, which comes in two flavors, active and passive. And in this video, we are just looking at the active participle. We will talk briefly about the meaning of the participle and then its basic strong form, but then we'll nip quickly on to some examples because that will be the easiest way to grasp what's going on. And then finally we'll come back and look at some of the weak forms. Remember, since this is part of the verb, it has its strong form, but if there is a weak consonant in the root, then that may or may not tweak the pattern. So, in essence, the basic idea of the participle is that you are emphasizing that the action is continuous or ongoing or constant or regular in some way. And in that respect, it's similar to the yiktol, which, if you remember, indicates an ongoing or incomplete action. Lots of people get very confused as to when to use a participle and when to use a yiktol. Please try and put that concern out of your head because 99 times out of 100 it will be obvious, and where it isn't obvious it may well be that either would be fine. So the basic idea is that the action is continuous. Let's just say continuous now for short form. Now it behaves like an adjective. So now would be a very good time to go back to your notes from week 1, your week 1 summary notes on adjective. Remind yourself that adjectives has 4 forms: masculine singular, masculine plural, feminine plural. And adjectives can be attributive, predicative, or substantive. And we'll go over those forms in just a minute. Okay. So for now, we have said that the basic idea of the participle form is a continuous or ongoing action. And we've said that it in form and in use is very much like an adjective. So gadol, gudola, gudolim, gudolot, 4 forms. And in the same way that there are 4 forms for the participle. Let's just consider for now the strong pattern, the pattern of active participle when there are no weak letters in your root. Kotev, kottevet, kotvim, kotvot. Notice that the first form, kotev, masculine singular, and both plural forms, kotvim, kotvot, just have 2 syllables each, stressed at the end. Kotev, kotvim, kotvot. The feminine singular looks a little odd until you realize that this pattern here is a segulate pattern, kotevet. So just like the word melech, stressed at the beginning of the word and has 2 segols, here too this feminine singular ending on the participle behaves like a segulate, kotevet. So this is the form, the only form which has 3 syllables, and it is stressed on the middle syllable. Kotev, kotevet, kotvim, kotvot. And so this will just have the idea of writing. Okay, let's see some examples. We'll start with predicative. Remember that a predicative use of an adjective or of a participle is one where you want to make an entire sentence. So typically you will need to supply is or was or are or some form of the verb to be. Ha'ish kotev. The man is writing. The man is writing. You will remember when you go back over your notes on adjectives that if an adjective or a participle are being used predicatively, then the adjective or participle never has the definite article. Ha'ish kotev. The man is writing. The man is masculine singular, and so my participle form is masculine singular. Ha'isha omeret. Ha'isha omeret. The woman is speaking. The woman, feminine singular, so I need the feminine singular form of the participle. I don't have the definite article on the participle because I'm using it predicatively. I'm making it into a full sentence. Ha'isha omeret. The woman is speaking, or the woman is saying. Yeladim holchim. Yeladim holchim. Children, masculine plural. Holchim, from halaka, to walk or go, are walking. Children are walking. Now we'll come back to this form in a minute, but I will just point out at this stage that this could either be predicative or attributive. You remember when we discussed adjectives that there is when there is no definite article on your noun, then there is, formally speaking, an ambiguity. This could be children are walking, or it could be used attributively, as we'll see in a minute, walking children. As usual, context is king. Omdot habanot. Omdot habanot. Several points here. The daughters, omdot, feminine plural, are standing. This example not only illustrating the feminine plural, but the fact that with the predicative adjective, you can put the adjective or participle up front if that is particularly what you want to emphasize. So if somebody says to you, "What are the daughters doing?" you could say, Omdot habanot. They are standing. The daughters are standing. And we put the standing up front because that is the most relevant bit of information. Okay, so much for the predicative participle. Behaves just like an adjective and makes a full sentence and never has the definite article but agrees with the noun in number and gender. Attributive participles can sometimes feel a little more complicated for an English speaker, but that is only because we don't in English have a particularly neat way of expressing the idea. As you'll see in a minute, the concept is straightforward, but the way we express it in English can sometimes make it seem a bit convoluted. So, ha'ish hakotev. Here, my participle, writing, agrees in number, gender, and definiteness. It has the definite article in agreement with the noun, and so it is being used attributively. So just like ha'ish hagadol would be the big man, ha'ish hagadol, the big man, ha'ish hakotev is the writing man, the writing man. Now, as I said, as I warned you, that doesn't feel very nice in English. What we would usually say is the man who is writing. The man who is writing, but all we mean by that is the writing man. Let's see that in a sentence. Vayomer el ha'ish hakotev. Let's say that King David is walking in his court and dictating a letter, and there is a man, his scribe, and he is writing, and David comes up to him, Vayomer David, let's say, Vayomer David el ha'ish hakotev. And David said to the writing man, or in this case we would have to translate it idiomatically as the man who was writing, but that, as I say, is simply because of our particular needs in English. He said to the writing man, he said to the man who was writing. Okay, let's have some other examples. Nashim omdot. This is technically ambiguous. It could be predicative. Nashim, wives, are standing. Wives are standing as a full sentence. Or it could be used attributively. What standing wives? Standing wives. Let's add a layer of complexity. No, not nashim anymore, but nashav. This is the possessive suffix that goes on plural nouns. I should have said nashim, of course, wives, even though it looks masculine, is obviously feminine, wives, and so it takes the feminine plural ending, even though you could be forgiven for thinking it should have the masculine plural ending. Nashim itself is grammatically feminine, wives, and so it takes the grammatical feminine plural ending. But now we're not saying wives, we're saying nashav, his wives. His wives. You remember that when you add a possessive suffix to a noun, that noun automatically becomes definite, because we are no longer talking about wives in an indefinite general sense. We are talking very specifically about his wives. And so we're being more specific, we can point to them, as it were, his wives, and so it counts as definite. And so, since these are attributive participles, it must agree in gender, feminine, number, plural, and definiteness. So here we have the definite article. We don't add the genitive suffix or possessive suffix to the participle. We just add the definite article. So, his standing wives. his standing wives. Or in better English, his wives who are standing, or his wives who were standing. The tense is dependent on the context. Let's see it in a sentence then. This is in a past tense context because I've got a vayiktol here. Vayar is, you remember, the apocryphated form from ra'a, to see. So vayar, he saw. Vayar et nashav ha'omdot. He saw his standing wives. He saw his wives who were standing. And lastly, just like with an adjective, if it stands by itself, usually with the definite article, then it can start to function purely and simply as a noun. So Haggadol can mean the big person. Typically, for example, if there are two brothers, then Haggadol can be shorthand for the older brother, and Hakaton, the smaller brother. So here we have Hakotev, the one who is writing, or the writer. This is very, very common indeed, use of the participle, and very often, in fact, the participle being used as a noun has become so common that we nowadays just think of it as a straightforward noun. So you have already met the noun shofet, a judge, but you can now see that this is the participle pattern, shofet, kotev. So a shofet is one who is judging, or one who habitually, customarily judges. And it's a very short step from one who habitually or customarily judges to simply thinking as judge. Okay, in the next video, I will go through some of our readings and we'll see in context and in practice each of these attributive, predicative and substantive uses of the adjective in more detail. But as a last part of this lesson, I'd like to go over the weak forms of the participle. Now, you're very familiar by now with this sort of table. You'll notice that there are far fewer columns in this table than we're used to. That is because the participle generally behaves pretty regularly. So you can see down here, first guttural, first aleph, first nun, first yod, and geminate roots all behave as if they were strong. So first nun, for example, we've been using nafal, or to fall, nofel, nofelet, noflim, noflot. It is completely regular, or completely like the strong pattern. First yod, remember we've got our Jack and Jill, our AA verbs, yashav, yeshav. Again, let's use yashav, yoshev, yoshevet, yoshvim, yoshvot. Completely regular. In the second guttural, so bocher, the only tweak that we need is that instead of kot vim, this silent shavah has become sounded, and that is simply to help the accurate pronunciation of this guttural. Remember that that for lots of the first millennium, AD CE, for lots of the first millennium, Hebrew was being transmitted in contexts where gutturals weren't being strongly pronounced. So in the Greek of the first few centuries, and in the Aramaic of the first few centuries, the gutturals were not being pronounced particularly distinctly, but in the preservation of the biblical Hebrew reading tradition, those were considered, it was considered vitally important to maintain the pronunciation of the gutturals. And so this a, Active Participle, is simply there to help us maintain the pronunciation of the chet. Bocharim, bocharot. Bocher, bocheret, bocharim, bocharot. Other than that, the pattern is usual. With the third guttural, we have seen this phenomenon before, that the third guttural spreads an a flavour. So instead of kotevet, we have borachat, borachat. So here the segulate pattern has been replaced with an a segulate pattern. Boreach, there is a furtive patach, which we spoke about towards the end of term. Boreach, borachat, borchim, borchot, as usual. Third alephs, we're used to this again by now. The aleph is very, very weak, and it doesn't have the strength to do very much, and in particular here, it doesn't have the strength to cause the conversion to this segulate pattern. So we simply have motzei, motzeit, motzei, motzeit, and then the usual motzim, motzot. So these first three columns, relatively few changes. As usual, hollow and third hay, also known as third yod, properly third yod if you remember, are the ones where we get more significant difficulties. So third hay or third yod, boneh, bonah, bonim, bonot. Boneh, bonah, bonim, bonot. It's as though we only have two consonants. Bon with an e, bon with an a, bon with an im, or bon with an ot. Boneh, bonah, bonim, bonot. The hollow pattern, kam, kama, kamim, kamot, is very, very similar in its kama, in its singular forms, to the beginning of the perfect. So here you have to watch out a little bit. In the perfect, kam, kama, kampta, kampt, kampti. But in the participle, kam, kama, it only differs in terms of where you place the stress. We'll go over that in more detail together. For now, think of it just as a two-letter root. Kam, kama, kamim, kamot. Okay, these two are the forms that are going to require a lot of memorization on your part, and these are the details which could trip you up if you're not careful in the others. Next video, practice going through some of these forms in context.